I'm Monica Poole, Quilt-as-you-go pattern designer and sewing tutor from Australia. During my time as a sewing tutor, I would meet people that had only ever made quilt tops and had never actually stitched through the 3 layers of the quilt, as in your quilt top, your batting and your backing. So in this video, I'm going to give you my top tips for basic quilting with a walking foot. To demonstrate, I'll be using our Fi Fi Flamingo applique pattern, and if you're interested, she's available to purchase as a PDF download from our website. The link is in the description. Now there's going to be a part 2 to this video in which I will show how to turn a quilted applique into a full quilt by adding rows of Quilt-as-you-go borders around the outside edge. So when it comes to batting for Quilt-as-you-go, I always say choose a nice flat low loft batting. The reason for that is that it's not going to pucker up and shrink too much when you're trying to join your pieces together. Try to choose a batting that is going to grip with your fabric rather than slip against your fabric. So have a look at this batting here. See how that just wants to grip onto the batting. Try to choose natural fibers. This one here is actually a cotton and bamboo blend, and I do love how this grips onto the fabric. Also, try to choose a batting with a scrim. Now, you don't have to do this, but if you're not sure what a scrim is a fine layer that runs through the batting and it holds all of the fibers together. On this particular batting, you can actually see where the scrim finishes on the edge of the batting there. But what the scrim does is it holds the batting nice and stable, so you're not going to have any stretch in the batting. And that is really quite good when you have to cut out, your pieces for Quilt-as-you-go. So whether you're cutting out squares or rectangles, it's going to stay in shape more than a batting that doesn't have a scrim. Look, this is a lovely batting also, but this is a batting that doesn't have a scrim, so you can see the stretch that you get in a batting that doesn't have a scrim. So unless you're using my easy cover strip method where the batting is cut 1/2 inch smaller around the edge, most times your batting and backing, make them about 1 inch bigger all the way around the edge. And now our next step is to hold those 3 layers together for quilting. So to hold your layers together, you can either use safety pins or basting spray. If you're going to use safety pins, it's a good idea to purchase proper quilting pins. They have this little bend in them. They're easier to put through your layers, and also they're quite nice and sharp. And when you go to put your safety pins in, just put your pins, probably about every 10 centimeters, or with this, I'd just be pinning around the edge and some in the outside edge. It is a good idea to perhaps tape your batting fabric onto your work surface just to hold that in place. But sometimes when you're doing Quilt-as-you-go and working in small sections, that's not necessary. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to use basting spray, and I'm going to show you how to actually use basting spray. There are different brands of basting spray on the market. I'm using 505, but whatever brand you use, make sure you read the instructions first and always use in a well ventilated area. To use basting spray, start with the back facing up and make sure you protect your work surface because the overspray can be sticky. So I have my layers smoothed out together, and I'm going to separate them first of all. And I'm going to use just a light application. You don't need a lot, and you only ever spray onto the batting, never onto the fabric. So I do 1/2 and then I smooth that out, and then I shall do the other side. Don't hold the can too close, otherwise you'll get clumps in the one section. And then flip it over and repeat the same process for the front. And there are my layers all held together, ready to start quilting. When it comes to the needle, I like to use a size 80/12 quilting needle. Now, a quilting needle is a nice sharp needle. It is a medium size needle because we're sewing through our thicknesses. And it has got a slightly larger eye in it just in case you're using a slightly thicker thread. So when quilting, it is advisable to use a walking foot. So they look different from all different brands. This one here is a generic one. This is one of my Benina sewing machine. My Faf actually has a built-in dual feed on it. and I believe a lot of other machines do now, and this is the walking foot from my brother's sewing machine. So basically the reason why you need a walking foot is because, well, number one, we're sewing through 3 thicknesses of fabric, and the feed dogs that pull your work through on the underneath, what's going to happen is they're going to pull the work through, and then your normal foot is just going to push along. So you're going to get that puckering where the underneath puckers up, and then you end up getting the stretching and rippling on the top. So basically what the walking foot does is it's almost like having an extra set of feed dogs on top of your work. So as the walking foot moves up and down, it helps to just glide and move along the top edge of your fabric. So helping to evenly feed all layers through your sewing machine while you're quilting. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to outline around the edge of our applique shapes. That just means we're going to stitch nice and closely around the edge, and what that does is that is going to define our shapes and to help them puff up a little bit. So let's get started. Here's a tip to start quilting in a way that you're not going to end up with that little lump of threads on the back of your work. So what I do is put the foot down, and then I'm going to put the needle down. So I'm going to turn the wheel forwards. Now if you've got a needle up, needle down button, you can just use that. But if you don't, you're going to turn the wheel forwards, hang on to your top thread, and it's going to go all the way down, all the way back up again, and when it comes back up, it's going to bring the bobbin thread with it. So we want to pull the bobbin thread up to the top of our work. Having a pair of tweezers is quite handy, and there it is there. So now the next thing I'm going to do is to start sewing. I'm going to put the needle down, and then I'll lift the foot. I'm going to bring the thread behind the foot, and whenever I start quilting, I like to put my stitch length down to quite low. So I actually go down to 0.4, maybe even sometimes 0.2, but it's quite small, and then I will do, say, 7 small stitches. And then once I've done that, I'll then go back up to, I normally quilt with a stitch length of 3. So that just depends on what suits your sewing machine. So I'm going to continue quilting now. Just like that. And on this particular applique here, we have blanket stitched around the edge of it. So if you want to know more about stitching around raw edge applique shapes, we do have our YouTube video showing you how to do that too. Cut your threads off as you go to keep your work nice and neat and tidy. To finish, back at the starting point where you actually started, just put your stitch length back down to that small stitch length of 0.4 and finish with another 7 stitches. So you're not actually stitching on top of each other, you're just doing some nice little small stitches. I have thread cutters, so I'm just going to cut, and this is what it looks like on the back. If you have a needle up, needle down button, to bring your bobbin thread up to the top, put your foot down, press the needle down button hanging onto your top thread, press it again, the needle comes up to the top, and there's my bobbin thread, needle down, thread to the back, and time to start sewing again. If you can, hold on to the thread lightly, and then you're right to start sewing. When you need to pivot, needle in the down position and pivoting onto your next direction. Now for some echo quilting. Echo quilting is when you sew around the edge of a shape, sewing an even distance all the way around the edge. So to do this, you can use the edge of your walking foot as a guide, and depending on how wide you want that space, normally it's about 1/4 of an inch, perhaps a little bit bigger than 1/4 of an inch. So you could move your needle position over to the left a little bit if you like, or you could just, you know, stay with that wider space. So this is my Bonina walking foot, and it would be the same thing if you were using one of these generic walking feet. They seem to be a little bit narrower, so that is probably already going to give you your 1/4 inch space. So when it comes to echo quilting, it's just all about finding a guide on your foot that you can rest against the edge of your applique shape to give you an even distance all the way around the edge. So this is the foot that I'll be using. So I'm going to just move my needle position over a little bit, and that's going to give me a generous 1/4 inch spacing from this guide here to the needle. So basically what I'm doing is I've found my guide on my foot, which is here, and I'm just going to, as I sew, just make sure that that is running along the edge of my applique shape. So taking it nice and slow as you go around the curves, and when you need to pivot, just stopping with the needle in the down position and spinning your work. You can roll your quilt up just so that it can easily fit through your machine nicely. Here's our flamingo with the echo quilting around the edge, and now I'm going to mark up for some crosshatch quilting. To do this, locate the 45-degree line on your ruler and position that along the top edge. So the 45-degree line is running along the straight top edge of our fabric, and now mark lines. I'm just going to mark my first line like that. I'm stopping and starting at the echo quilt. And when it comes to marking up for quilting, make sure that you use a fabric marker that can easily be erased from your fabric. So there's all different types. The big message is to make sure you test it first before you use it. I'm using a Soline ceramic marking pencil, and I use this all the time, and I know that if any lines are going to show, I can easily rub out. Now that's my first line, and I'm going to mark my next line. So to do that, just flip the ruler over. So I'm flipping it upside down basically, and there's my 45-degree line, which I am running along the top edge of the fabric, and it's connecting at the corner, and I'm just going to run my line through, stopping and starting at the echo quilting. And I'm going to make my spaces 1.5 inches apart. So I'm going to locate my 1.5 inch line. So there's my 1/2 inch, there's another inch, so that's 1.5 inches. I'm just going to position the 1.5 inch line on the line that I just marked, and that will give me my next spacing. So continue marking your lines in this direction. And now mark your lines going in the opposite direction. All marked up for quilting, now to head to the sewing machine to start stitching. I'm going to stop and start at the echo quilting line, just using those small stitches like I showed you before. So where possible, try to start at your applique and work towards the outer edge. And then as you sew, if you feel that your work is going to pucker, pull the work apart and then just slightly ease towards the foot. So here's our piece with the quilting complete. A couple of things, I like to make sure that I finish at the edges with either a reverse stitch or my small stitches. That way I know that my stitches are going to be nice and secure when they are in the seam. And when it comes to finishing off with your threads, some people like to thread up with a hand sewing needle and they thread their threads in through the layers of the quilt. But I like to just trim my threads away. I know that if I was to pull on a thread, so just a single one there. I know that my small stitches, 6 or 7 stitches so nice and close together, that's very secure. So I'm just going to hang on to those threads and just clip them nice and close to the edge of the quilt. If you like learning with me, as I mentioned before, in the next video we're going to make Fi Fi into a quilt by adding quilt-as-you-go borders. It's a fun scrap quilt idea, and if you don't want to miss it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to click the notification button. Thanks for watching. Bye!